What's up, guys? Thanks for watching another episode of Two Car Garage. You've waited for this video for a long time on our Virago 920 build. We're not modifying anything. We're not customizing anything. We're not building more wiring harnesses. This is the start. This is the start of the actual build, where now it's just putting things back together. This is the most rewarding part of the whole build. Stay tuned. You're gonna like what you see. Thanks for watching. So when I say that we're putting a motorcycle together, what are we starting with? Well, here's our Virago. There's our engine right there. Here's a couple of pieces right there. Here's a billion little baggies with nuts and bolts right there. There's some new parts sitting in baggies and packages right there. There's the wiring harness as well. And then over here is where we have some other bigger parts. We've got our frame, wheels, swing arm, forks right there, and that's pretty much it. Oh, some more parts in that box. So this is what's awesome about building a motorcycle from nothing, is that every nut and bolt has been removed. Every piece is off, and we literally now just have to play Legos and assemble it from nothing. From this blue mat thing, I think it's a moving blanket from Harbor Freight, you will see a sweet custom motorcycle rise up out of the ashes. So, enjoy.
Now, my powder coater does some really good work. He's been doing it for a long time, but nobody's perfect, and unless you tell him, how's he gonna know? So here we have our swing arm tube, I guess, that our inner bearings have to sit in. There was a little bit of overspray inside of it, so I just took that little flap wheel on the Dremel, cleaned it up on the inside so that these bearings could be pressed in nice and smooth. After putting these swing arm bearings in the freezer for a couple nights, they are nice and shrunk like a frightened turtle, so that you can just press them right inside. Is that Seinfeld? The water was cold or something like that. I don't know. Either way, I love using new parts. Look how nice this looks, right? With this, I'm not sure what this is, right? Like an inner swing arm tube thing. Like the long swing arm bolt runs through this. But man, I mean, new parts, new grease. It's just very rewarding. I love getting old bikes running again, but there's just something more rewarding about using new parts and building a freshly refreshed motorcycle from scratch. Now that the swing arm is done, we can turn our attention to the steering stem. Now, this is not a fun job. I feel like no matter how many times I do steering stem races and bearings, it's always finicky and you always have a little bit of a hard time, even with the right tools. So I like to heat up the stem a little bit. You saw me using the torch, and then press in these races. This lower race is up inside the neck, so it's a bit hard to get to. You really need like the perfect tool. Here it is, folks, Tool of the Year award, and it doesn't go to me. Instead, it goes to this. This is the Lyle bearing greaser. I've used this for a long time, and it's amazing. Look how it perfectly pushes the grease into every part of the bearing. And you don't have to do the old palm trick where you sort of smash it into your palm to try to fill it with grease. It fills these bearings with grease so easy, and it's cheap. I'll link to it down below. But with that bearing greaser, now it's time to press on this lower steering bearing. For this, you need either a pipe, which I have used in the past, or this really nice Motion Pro bearing press thing. So, bingo bango, hammer it on, and you're making bacon. Now sit back and watch as you watch me take a little bit of grease from this bearing and put a little bit of grease on this race, so tenderly, with such care, as I place the lower triple tree into the neck, and then I put the top bearing on as I press it down into the race. Does it fit? It fits perfectly. Amazing. I didn't mess this up. Isn't that crazy? Oh wait, I did mess this up, and here's how. Although some motorcycles have an actual spec where you have to tighten these steering nuts so that there's a certain drag on the triple tree, I just tighten it to where there's no slop, but there's also not a lot of resistance to turning it back and forth. That way you know you're just putting the right amount of pressure squeezing these bearings together. And then you lock it in place with that top one, and you're ready for the upper triple tree. And I mean, dang, this thing is like starting to look like a motorcycle. I mean, look at this. And what good is any motorcycle without, a complete frame and swing arm. So now we're actually putting our first real bolts and nuts on this thing. I mean, up until now it's just been seals and everything, but here we have some nuts and bolts. This is an interesting design, how this Virago frame, there's like a lower section and an upper section, and it's held together with just 2 bolts and nuts. So the key is to use Loctite, right? These are pretty important nuts and bolts. For my steering stops, I used these CognitoMoto adjustable ones. So I drill and tapped these holes in the lower triple, and then you install these and they can slide a little bit so you can get them just perfect. Now watch along as I do some of the very last maintenance items that need to be done for our build. We're replacing the front fork fluid, and I now realize that that fork fluid is actually really nice. The previous person probably replaced it not too long ago. But at only $15 or so a liter, it's worth replacing. The fork seals are in good shape, so might as well leave a sleeping horse lie and just replace the fluid. And my method that you saw for replacing the fluid is just measure the exact amount out and put the exact amount in.
What I'm going to do is grease that fork seal right there. So I'm just going to put a little bit of grease around the outside and then push it down so that that seal sort of captures that grease, and then wipe it off. This dust seal is a little bit cracked and rotted, but unless this actual oil seal is leaking, I'm okay with this. It's not worth disassembling and replacing everything.
The method for doing this is just to lightly grease around the entire circumference of the inner fork, then put your weight on it, bounce up and down a couple times to spread it out, and then once or twice, give it the business.
And you can see that sort of pulled down a lot of that grease. Now there's just a little bit at the top that we'll just wipe off. Then we're set. Pop our dust seal back down. One fork's done. We'll just do the same thing with the other one.
Now I already cleaned these calipers up a lot, and that's why they look so good. And even though there's some meat left on the pads, you just don't know how old this stuff is. And when you're building this whole motorcycle, it's worth the money just to go ahead and replace things like brake pads.
These are the stock pads. They say Tokiko on it, which is who makes the brake calipers. Maybe some of you guys who have a Gixxer can tell me, if these are just OEM Suzuki pads, would they still say Tokiko on the pad itself? Or would they say Suzuki or whatever? But either way, pretty interesting.
I don't know if it's by design or because I have the calipers just completely free and in my hand, but this was literally the easiest brake job I've ever done. I mean, they just go right in, 2 pins, and you're done. Now I did lightly grease the pins with some brake grease, but very light as to not contaminate the pads or rotor.
I am thrilled with the progress we've made so far. Some of this work is tedious, it's laborious, it's not super exciting to watch, but it's all necessary, right? It's necessary to get it to the point where it is now, which is a great building platform. Because soon we'll be able to start building this motorcycle like a Lego kit, right? Just piece by piece, putting it together. Thank you so much for watching. Hit that subscribe button, that way you're notified when the next video comes out. We'll see you then. Thanks.